Troy Benjamin sat behind his luxurious walnut desk, his sharp gaze locked onto the file in front of him. One of New York's top cardiac surgeons, Troy had everything: prestige, wealth, and the admiration of the medical world. But there was one thing he didn't have: an heir. He didn't believe in love. After being betrayed by his fiancée, Troy had sworn never to let his heart be vulnerable again. He devoted his entire life to his career, running his own private hospital and ensuring that no one could breach the walls he had built around himself. But after his father's passing, an unsettling emptiness took root inside him. He needed someone to carry on his legacy, but marriage and emotional entanglements were out of the question. The solution? A simple contract, a surrogate mother. His assistant had meticulously screened a list of candidates, but none had caught his attention until he saw her file. Naomi Williams, 24 years old, a dedicated nurse at his hospital, a strong woman who had sacrificed her own dreams to care for her ailing mother. Naomi worked tirelessly, juggling multiple shifts to cover medical expenses and keep food on the table. Despite her hardships, she carried a quiet resilience and an unshakable sense of dignity. Troy arranged to meet her the next day. When Naomi stepped into his office, she had no idea that her decision would alter the course of her life forever. Troy studied her carefully, his voice calm but authoritative. "I won't waste your time, Naomi. I want you to carry my child. The contract lasts 2 years. In return, you will receive $5 million. Naomi froze. "You want to hire me to have your baby?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Troy nodded without hesitation. "Exactly. A simple agreement. No emotions, no complications." Naomi stared at him, feeling as if her entire world had just tilted off its axis. Naomi left Troy's office with her mind in turmoil. $5 million, a sum that could change her life, erase her debts, save her mother, and offer a future she never dared to dream of. But the cost? Her body, 9 months tied to a man she barely knew, and perhaps her heart. She lay awake all night, wrestling with the weight of her decision. And then, as the first rays of dawn streamed through her window, she took a deep breath, picked up her phone, and called him. "I accept," she whispered, her voice barely steady, as if she had just stepped into a dangerous game where the stakes were far higher than she could predict. The contract signing was swift. Everything was laid out in black and white. She would live in Troy's penthouse to ensure the best care for the baby. No emotions, no attachments. Once the child was born, she would walk away with the agreed payment. A clean-cut deal. Simple. Cold. But the one thing that wasn't in the contract was love. From the moment she moved in, Naomi realized nothing was going as she expected. Troy wasn't as detached as she had assumed. Instead, he was always watching her, his sharp gaze filled with something she couldn't decipher. She tried to keep her distance, reminding herself that this was just a contract. But Troy was always there, always close, even when she wasn't sure if she wanted him to be. One night, as Naomi stood on the balcony, gazing up at the stars, she heard slow, measured footsteps behind her. "You like the stars?" His deep, steady voice cut through the quiet night. Naomi smiled faintly, never taking her eyes off the constellations above. "They make me feel small, but in a good way. They remind me that life is bigger than the struggles I'm facing." Troy studied her in silence, his expression unreadable, but in that moment, something in his gaze softened, something unguarded that she had never seen before. And then, as if it had been inevitable all along, Troy began noticing her in ways he couldn't control. The way she bit her lip when she was lost in thought, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about dreams she had long abandoned, the way his pulse faltered every time she laughed. He kept telling himself that this was just a contract, nothing more. But every accidental touch, every stolen glance, every quiet moment between them whispered the truth he refused to acknowledge. He was losing control. And the most dangerous part? Naomi felt it too. Troy couldn't remember the last time he had felt like this, completely out of control. His entire life had been ruled by logic, by discipline, by the unwavering certainty that emotions were dangerous and unpredictable. But Naomi? She was destroying everything he had built. At first, he thought it was just physical attraction. a quiet, effortless beauty that drew him in against his will. But it wasn't just that. She was strong, sharp-witted, and unyielding. She met his gaze without fear, as if she could see through every mask he had ever worn. The harder he tried to keep his distance, the more he was pulled toward her. One evening, after a quiet dinner between them, Naomi stepped out onto the balcony, inhaling deeply as the night air wrapped around her. Troy followed, standing beside her, their breaths mingling in the crisp coolness. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice lower, rawer than he had meant for it to be. Naomi turned to him, her gaze gentle but piercing. "Do you think I should?" Troy steadied her for a long moment before murmuring, "I don't know." The silence that stretched between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with something unsaid, something inevitable. And then, before he could think better of it, before he could remind himself of the rules he had set, he leaned in and kissed her. In that moment, every line they had drawn vanished. Her lips were soft, warm, and when she trembled slightly in his arms, Troy knew he had just crossed a threshold he could never return from. His hands tightened around her waist, pulling her closer, feeling her warmth, her heartbeat, everything that was Naomi. And when he finally broke the kiss, she looked up at him, not with fear, but with trust. And that terrified him more than anything, because he knew then he didn't just want a child with her, he wanted her, all of her heart, forever. Naomi had never imagined she could fall for a man like Troy Benjamin. Cold, controlled, always composed. But now, as she rested her hand over her stomach, feeling the tiny heartbeat growing inside her, she knew her feelings for him had shattered every barrier she had built. She wanted to believe that Troy felt the same. She had seen the way his eyes softened when he touched her, heard the warmth in his voice when he spoke about the baby, and most of all, she had felt love in his kiss. But then, one moment destroyed it all. She was walking past Troy's office when she heard his voice through the slightly open door. His tone was detached, clinical, a businessman discussing a transaction. This was always part of the agreement. Naomi froze. The contract ensures she carries the baby safely. That was the purpose of this entire arrangement from the beginning. Her chest tightened painfully. And after the baby is born, another voice, his lawyer perhaps. A long silence, and then Troy spoke. "I'll make sure she and the child are well taken care of financially, but beyond that, nothing changes." Naomi felt her entire world collapse. She had wanted to believe he had changed. She had wanted to believe that what they shared was real. But now she realized it had all been a perfectly executed plan, a carefully calculated strategy. Her heart clenched as she slowly backed away, her hands protectively cradling her stomach. She couldn't stay. She couldn't allow herself to be part of this soulless transaction. That night, Naomi packed her bags, leaving only a single note on the table. "I'm sorry, Troy. I can't do this." And then she walked out the door, leaving behind everything she had once hoped could be hers. Troy returned to the penthouse later than usual, exhaustion pressing against him. He loosened his tie, already longing for the sight of Naomi curled up with a book or waiting for him in the dim glow of her room. But as he stepped inside, an unnatural silence filled the space. His chest tightened. Something was wrong. No sound of Naomi's footsteps, no warm glow from her room, no trace of her soft scent in the air. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Heart pounding, he strode toward her room, already dreading what he might find. The moment he saw the empty closet, his vision blurred. His breath hitched as his gaze landed on the single note left on the table. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Just 5 words. Just enough to shatter him. "I'm sorry, Troy. I can't do this." For a moment, he couldn't breathe. She was gone. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone, his voice rough with desperation as he called his assistant, his driver, anyone who might know where she had gone. "Where is she?" It only took one call to find her. She had gone home. To her mother's house. Troy didn't waste another second. He stormed out of the penthouse, the wind and rain slamming against his face as he climbed into his car. The storm raged around him, raindrops hitting the windshield like gunfire, but he didn't care. He drove like a man possessed, hands gripping the wheel, mind spiraling with only one thought. He couldn't lose her. The house loomed ahead, a warm light glowing from within, standing in stark contrast to the chaos inside him. He barely stopped the car before throwing the door open, running straight to the porch. He pounded on the door, not caring how desperately it sounded. And then she opened it. Naomi stood there, her eyes wide, frozen in shock. Troy barely noticed the rain soaking through his shirt, the cold biting into his skin. None of it mattered. The only thing he could see, the only thing that existed in his world, was Naomi. His knees hit the wet ground with a force that sent pain shooting through his body, but he didn't care. "Please," his voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Don't do this. Don't walk away from me." Naomi stood frozen, her fingers gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Troy swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. "I don't care about the contract. I don't care about the money, the hospital. None of it means anything." He looked up at her, rainwater mixing with the raw emotion in his eyes. "I only care about you." His voice broke. "I love you, Naomi. And I am terrified because I don't know how to live without you." Tears slipped down Naomi's cheeks. "If you don't want me, I'll leave," Troy whispered, voice breaking. "But I will never stop loving you." She stared at him, the man who had once been so untouchable, now utterly broken before her. And then she stepped toward him. Naomi stepped past the doorway, the icy rain pouring down around her, but she felt nothing except the storm raging inside her. Before her, Troy remained on his knees, his shirt soaked through. Yet he didn't move. His entire world was fixated on her. And for the first time, his piercing blue eyes held no distance, no coldness. Only desperation, only heartbreak, only love. Raw and unfiltered. Her breath hitched as she slowly lowered herself to her knees in front of him. His chest rose and fell unevenly as her trembling hand reached out, fingers brushing against his rain-slicked skin. She wasn't sure if it was rain or tears clinging to his face. "You're such an idiot," she whispered, her voice shaking. Troy clutched her hand tightly, his grip strong but pleading. "I know," he rasped, "but if you give me a chance, I will spend every day proving that I will never lose you again." Naomi broke. The weight of every pain, every fear, every unspoken emotion collapsed inside her. And then she threw herself into his arms. "I love you, Troy." Troy froze for half a second. Then, as if something inside him had shattered, he kissed her. But this time, it wasn't a kiss of possession, of control, of contracts. It was a surrender. It was everything he had held back, everything he had denied himself. It was a promise without words. They married a month later, not because of a contract, not because of the baby, but because they couldn't exist without each other. Troy was no longer the cold, untouchable man he once was. He didn't fear love anymore. He embraced it. He loved Naomi with everything he had, and it made him stronger than any power he had ever held. One golden afternoon, Troy stood on their front porch, watching Naomi cradle their son in her arms. The baby slept soundly against her chest, and her eyes shone with the purest happiness he had ever seen. Stepping forward, he wrapped both of them in his embrace, whispering against her ear, "You are everything to me, Naomi, forever." Naomi smiled, resting her head against his chest. She had finally found her home. Troy Carter never imagined that a contract could change his life in this way. Years had passed since the night he knelt in the rain, begging Naomi not to leave. Now, they were no longer two strangers bound by a soulless agreement, but a real family, one built on love, not terms and conditions. They often joked about it. "Do you remember our contract?" Naomi teased, resting her head on his shoulder as they lounged on the porch. Troy chuckled, pulling her closer. "Of course. I made it very clear. No emotions, no attachments." Naomi raised an eyebrow, gently tilting his chin. And who was the first to break that clause? Troy smirked before pressing a soft kiss to her lips. "I think we need a new contract." Naomi giggled. "Oh, and what are the terms?" He gazed into her eyes, his voice steady and full of warmth. "I love you. Forever. No conditions. No expiration date." Naomi felt her heart skip just like it had the first time he kissed her under the stars. Before she could respond, two little figures came running toward them, laughter echoing through the golden afternoon. Troy felt something tighten in his chest as Michael crashed into him, his little arms wrapping tightly around his father's neck. Emma followed, giggling as she clung to Naomi. Naomi laughed, brushing a kiss against Emma's forehead before glancing up at Troy. Troy's eyes met, and in that moment, no words were needed. "We love you," their children chorused, their voices bright and full of innocence. Troy exhaled shakily, his heart swelling in a way that was almost overwhelming. He pressed a firm kiss to Michael's hair, then reached for Naomi's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. He turned to her, voice steady but full of emotion. "So, do I still need to sign a new contract for this?" Naomi chuckled, squeezing his hand. "This contract has no end date, Mr. Benjamin." Troy smiled, looking at his family, the family he never thought he'd have, but now couldn't live without. And in that moment, he knew. Love wasn't a contract. Love was forever.